Hi there, I'm Sister Maryina Herde, Elder, and that makes no difference if you know my last name or not, but I just thought that was fun to say. And I have been a friend of both Rob and Lisa since they were quite young, actually, and have known them, and they asked me to talk about my pioneer heritage. So I'd like to kind of show you, I don't know, this is kind of could be blurry, but this is my mother on the group sheet. So I'd be over here, and I'm going to talk about this man right here, who was really my grandfather. Now you'd look at me because I look so young. You wouldn't think my grandfather was actually a pioneer, but he was. And that's because when he got married to his second wife, not a plural marriage, his first wife died, and he married his second wife, was only a year older than his oldest daughter. And that's my grandmother. So my grandfather was 62 when my mother was born. And he has a whole bunch of stories about his life and when he was born. So my great-grandfather, who was Orange Warner, yes, orange like the orange, named after Prince William of Orange, who I am related to. And he, after they had joined the church and they were in Nauvoo, they helped build the temple in Nauvoo. And they took out their endowments there. And then when they fled Nauvoo, they went to Montrose, Iowa, which if any of you have been there, it's right across almost exactly from Nauvoo. You can see it you can see Nauvoo from Montrose when I have been there. And if you've seen the Joseph Smith movie at the Joseph Smith building in Salt Lake, then you know the conditions of the pioneers during the winter when they were there at Montrose. Now, as a kid, I had this kind of concept of everybody left Nauvoo all at the same time. Well, they didn't. Then I thought they all went and got organized and then took off from Montrose, You know, they stayed for years at Montrose, or in winter quarters, as it was called. And my grandfather, not my great-grandfather, my grandfather was born, and his name was Orange Horatio Warner. And his mother passed away shortly after his birth. He was born in March, you can imagine, and it had been snowing. And they were living in a wagon with a shelter built off to the side. And my grandfather tried to find a woman that was well enough to be able to provide milk for him, a wet nurse. And he couldn't find any. So what he did is he put cow's milk in a leather glove with a hole in it so he could use that like a nipple and feed him. So he used his old gloves. And for those of us who have new babies and scrubbed everything, can you imagine doing that and how dirty that would be? But they did that, and he survived. His father carried him in a blanket tied around his waist because it was so cold, he wanted him to stay warm. And then he put his clothes on over that. When they finally took off, he arrived in the Salt Lake Temple in the Salt Lake Valley in 1851, and they were part of the Easton Kelsey Company. And some of you may have stories that you go back to that Easton Kelsey Company, and we might know stories that are the same. His family settled in Fillmore, and my great-grandfather, just the plain orange, not Orange Horatio, helped build the fort around Fillmore to help protect it from the Indians. And my great-grandfather's picture hangs in the old State House Museum. If you ever get down there, you can see it. But my grandfather, not my great-grandfather, the original, is Orange. This is Orange Horatio. Orange Horatio told many stories as being a young man and growing up, not having any shoes. They made shoes out of leather, kind of moccasin type things, and boots where they would put papers and newspapers to try to keep him warm. But most of the time he went barefoot. And he even reported that he could ice skate on the ice on his bare feet. When he was 17, he was called to serve the equivalent, I guess, of a work mission. He joined, was asked by Brigham Young to go back and bring saints back from Montrose, from winter quarters. And so, you know, I can't remember, the migration, couldn't think of the word. The migration lasted from 1847 through 1868. So my grandfather became a part of the very first and the very last, because he served two missions of going to winter quarters and then coming back, and he was 17. Then the next time he did it, he was 19. And he was known as Goliath because he was 6'4". Now, that's pretty tall for our age, but for those days when an average height of a man was about 5'5", then you've got to realize that, you know, and Joseph Smith was known as a really tall man, a very tall man. He was 6 foot. So that was one of the reasons why they called him Goliath, and he was so strong. So he swam repeatedly back and forth across the Missouri River to bring the wagons and guide the oxen and guide the teams across. And if you've ever looked at how wide the Missouri River is, you'll know how strong he must have been. I'm really proud of my heritage. I'm proud of the things that my mother learned, that she taught me, and that she learned from her father. Her father was 62 when she was born, but he taught her to ride a horse, shoot a rifle, to lasso cattle, shear a sheep, help a lamb be born, and made her memorize poetry. And because of that period of hard work that she learned, she passed that on to me. And I hope that that pioneer spirit continues into my children.